On today's episode of Women That Kill, we look at Gesche Gottfried, a woman her neighbors called the Angel of Bremen. She was kind. She was selfless. She was the first person to show up when someone fell ill, and the last to leave their bedside. She was beloved. She was also a poisoner. She confessed to killing 15 people over more than a decade, poisoning them slowly, carefully, and with a patience that is almost impossible to comprehend. There was no known accomplice. The crimes took place in Bremen, Germany, in the early 1800s. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe and like this video. It helps more people find the show. Gesche Gottfried was born on March the 6th, 1785 in Bremen, into a poor family. She had a twin brother named Johann Tim Jr., and from the very beginning, the family dynamic was shaped by favoritism. Her parents, her mother, Gesche Margrethe Tim, a seamstress, and her father, Johann Tim, a tailor, clearly preferred her brother. Her father, in particular, pushed her toward marriage at the earliest opportunity, as though her primary value was in becoming someone else's responsibility. She was known to everyone around her as Gesche, the low German form of Gesine. At 21, she married Johann Mittenberg, a saddler who made his living in Bremen. They had 3 children together. On the surface, Gesche's life looked ordinary, modest, the kind of life that leaves no particular mark on history. But something was building underneath. To truly understand Gesche Gottfried, you have to understand the world she lived in. The early 19th century in Germany was a period of extraordinary upheaval. The Napoleonic Wars had swept across Europe. Bremen, a proud merchant city with a long tradition of independence, had been occupied by French forces, incorporated into the French Empire, and then liberated. By 1815, the city was exhausted. Economies were disrupted. Families were fractured. The social order people once relied on had been shaken to its foundations. For women in this era, the instability was particularly acute. A woman's security depended almost entirely on the men in her life, her father, and then her husband. Most women had no meaningful financial independence and no safety net outside of family. There was no legal recourse if the men they depended on failed them. Bremen also placed enormous value on community reputation. Social standing, neighborly approval, and the perception of moral character were as real as money. To be seen as virtuous, helpful, selfless, good was not just a personal quality. It was a form of survival. Gesche Gottfried understood this better than almost anyone. The weapon Gesche used was called Mäusebutter, mouse butter in English. It was a rat poison commonly available in Germany at the time. Mäusebutter consisted of small flakes of arsenic mixed into animal fat. It was cheap and widely accessible. In small doses, it was almost undetectable. Gesche mixed tiny amounts of mouse butter into her victims' food. The doses were small enough that the poisoning progressed slowly, producing stomach pain, weakness, and a gradual decline that looked, to any observer, like illness. And when her victims began to suffer, Gesche was right there, caring for them, nursing them, sitting by their bedsides with what every witness described as extraordinary devotion and patience. She was the image of selfless love, all while continuing the poisonings. The method was diabolically effective, precisely because it required no secrecy. Gesche didn't need to hide. She was visible and present, and she was praised for her care. The more her victims suffered, the more heroic her nursing appeared. The more people died around her, the more her neighbors marveled at the cloud of misfortune that seemed to follow this kind, gentle, uncomplaining woman, and the more they loved her for bearing it with such grace. They called her the Angel of Bremen. The killing began with her husband. Things in the Mittenberg household had started well enough, but shifted when Johann's father died and left the couple an inheritance. Rather than providing stability, the money appeared to unlock something destructive in Johann. He began drinking. He began gambling. By 1813, he told Gesche that the money was gone, that they were destitute. A few months later, after a short period of stomach pain, Johann Mittenberg was dead. What followed over the next 15 years was a methodical and chilling progression through the people closest to Gesche. Her mother, Gesche Tim, died in May 1815, following stomach pain. Her children died. A second husband, Michael Christoph Gottfried, a relatively wealthy wine merchant she had met after Johann's death, died. Friends died. Neighbors who had fallen ill and had invited Gesche into their homes to care for them died. One after another, people in Gesche Gottfried's life sickened and faded. Each death was mourned as a natural loss. Just the sad but unremarkable toll illness took on people in an era before modern medicine. Nobody suspected the Angel of Bremen. For more than a decade, Gesche operated without suspicion. The community saw what she presented: a devoted woman, perpetually burdened by loss and always rising to care for others despite her own grief. But in 1828, the truth began to surface. The exact circumstances leading to her arrest are unclear in historical records. On March 6, 1828, her 43rd birthday, Gesche Gottfried was apprehended by authorities. News of her arrest spread through Bremen like a shockwave. The beloved angel was accused of being something else entirely. When investigators examined the case, the pattern that had been invisible for so long suddenly became impossible to ignore. The deaths, the stomach pain, the slow declines. The woman was always present at the bedside. Gesche confessed. She admitted to killing 15 people and attempting to kill many more. The confession sent Bremen into collective disbelief. How had no one seen it? How had a woman poisoned people for more than a decade, in plain sight, celebrated for kindness, and nobody noticed? The question of why Gesche Gottfried did what she did has never been fully answered, and that uncertainty is part of what makes her case so deeply unsettling. She did not kill for a single clear financial motive, though some victims left her material benefits. She didn't appear to kill out of hatred or rage. The killings were patient, methodical, and wrapped in genuine, seeming care. Historians and criminologists have suggested Gesche may have suffered from what is now called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's a psychological condition in which a caregiver deliberately causes illness in those under their care, driven by a need for attention, sympathy, and the emotional reward of being seen as a devoted nurturer. The condition is rare and complex. Applying modern psychological frameworks to historical figures requires caution. But the pattern of Gesche's behavior, deliberate poisoning, theatrical nursing, community praise for her devotion, fits the profile in many ways. The emotional deprivation Gesche experienced in childhood, growing up less valued than her twin brother and pushed toward marriage early, may have planted the seeds of a deep, unmet need for love, recognition, and control. These conditions did not excuse what she did, but they may help explain its particular shape. Gesche Gottfried was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. On the day of her execution in 1831, an enormous crowd gathered in Bremen. The woman once beloved as the city's angel was now its most notorious criminal. The public wanted to witness the end of her story. Gesche Gottfried was publicly beheaded. She became the last person publicly executed in Bremen. After her death, a cobblestone was embedded in the pavement near Bremen Cathedral, called the Spookstein, or spitting stone. For generations, Bremen's residents would spit on it as they passed, a gesture of contempt for the woman who had betrayed their trust. The spitting stone remains there to this day. At the end of every episode, if I can find the killer's birthday, I take a look at their zodiac sign, because it gives us an interesting lens through which to view who they were. Gesche Gottfried was born on March 6, 1785, making her a Pisces. Pisces are deeply inward-facing, sensitive, emotionally intelligent, and highly attuned to others' feelings. They absorb the emotional landscape of any room. Permeable and adaptive, they sense what others need to see and feel. They cannot be easily pinned down. Their behavior shifts with the people and the moment. And when you look at Gesche through that lens, something deeply uncomfortable comes into focus. She read people with extraordinary precision. She knew exactly what her community needed to see: devotion, sacrifice, uncomplaining love, and she gave it to them so convincingly that they built an entire identity around her goodness. She adapted. She absorbed. She reflected back to everyone around her the version of herself they most wanted to believe in. Pisces are also said to carry a complicated relationship with sorrow, drawn to it, even addicted to it, finding in melancholy a kind of intensity that feels more real than ordinary contentment. And Gesche Gottfried created sorrow everywhere she went. She surrounded herself with suffering. Whether that suffering fed something in her that nothing else could satisfy is a question that psychiatrists and historians are still debating, nearly 2 centuries later. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more, check out my playlists. There are plenty more stories waiting for you.